We're ready to start recording. Oh, you are recording. I can see the recording button on. So welcome everybody. We are very thrilled that you could make it for another AgencyTribe meeting. Today we have got Andrew Barta talking to us about, now I hope I pronounce it correctly, is it Umbraco or I think it depends on where you live, how you pronounce it.
You know, I've been asking that question since I started, so I don't know if there's a pronunciation.
Yeah, it should have one of those phonetic things underneath it so that everyone kind of pronounces it consistently.
Nobody can pronounce those phonetic things.
Yeah, that would be cool. That could become part of how the brand looks, you know. This is how you say it. Exactly. Anyway, we're really glad everyone could join us today. It was actually initiated by Fraser, who said he was really interested in hearing about Umbraco, and I know that it is also the basis for some of the platforms that have been BC replacements, and it is an open source system, but apart from that I know very little about it, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Andrew, who joins us, and he will introduce himself, who he is, how he fits into the picture. He's got a presentation for us, and then we'll have questions and answers. He has said that he's happy for you to ask questions as we go along, so don't be shy to grab the microphone or to pop something into chat. We'll be watching the chat and we'll let him know if there's any questions as we go along. So over to you, Andrew.
Wonderful.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me, to everybody watching and allowing me to talk about Umbraco. And as Ursh mentioned, and I'll get into this more, but I run some of the trainings for Umbraco, and I always like to make it as conversational as possible. So feel free to chime in with any questions. I'll keep my eye on the chat too, so that when I'm actually going over a specific topic, you can feel free to dive in right at that moment instead of waiting until the end. And yeah, with that, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll just dive right into the presentation. Let's see here, right there. All right, so can we see the screen? Are we good there?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. All righty. So this is all about Umbraco. And I guess I should also ask too, before I dive into this, you had mentioned, Ursh, that somebody had brought up working with Umbraco. Has anybody else out there worked with Umbraco or heard of Umbraco, or is it kind of brand new to everyone?
I've actually done some work with Umbraco and started some migrations across using Umbraco.
Okay, great. And some other chats, brand new, great to hear. Only heard of it. Okay, so kind of all over the board, but relatively new to even the brand and the software. So hopefully this gives you a good overview. I'm going to try to keep it at a somewhat high level to just cover the concepts and a little background on the company too. So before I even dive into that, it's probably important to also introduce myself. I've been using it every day for 6 months. Great to hear, Daniel. Yeah, so I should introduce myself. My name's Andrew Barta, and I'm the American Trainer and Friend Maker. That's my title that we came up with at Umbraco, which is probably pretty funny to some those of us in the US that know what ATF is, atf.gov. It stands for Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's a government agency here. Yeah. And so anyway, that's my funny little title. At the HQ, most HQ members have funny titles like WOW or OMG, all those things. Really what that means is that I lead our training department, and then I also work with FriendMaker, I work with our partners, and I'll cover partners more in a bit. The contact information is down there at the bottom: email, LinkedIn, and Twitter handle. Feel free to reach out over any of those, and I'll also be sure to share these slides at the end so that they can get shared around and you guys can contact me. So a little bit more about my background. I've got a Bachelor of Arts in Information Systems, Management Information Systems, as well as Marketing. And so I didn't know this at the time, but it kind of set me up perfectly to work with content management systems, both a little bit on the technical side and then also on the marketing side, and thinking about how are we going to work with our marketing team, finance team, accounting team, whatever it may be. And so I started with Umbraco back in 2013 and worked with them for 4.5 years. I actually moved over to Denmark for a bit and lived, that's where the HQ, the Umbraco HQ is. And then after that time period, I went and worked with a small web agency. They were one of our gold partners in Denver, Colorado. And so it was really great to get that back and kind of both sides of the coin, working with the CMS and, oh, thank you, Barry. And so working with the CMS and the actual teaching of the software, and then the other side of that, which is the implementation, which it sounds like most of us are on that side of it, in the actual implementation of these different softwares. So I did that for 1 year. And then back in 2018, about a year ago, I rejoined with the Umbraco HQ. I really missed this side of it. I hope to convey kind of the passion around the Umbraco project and the community. So I miss doing more of these presentations, trainings, that sort of thing. And the Umbraco HQ was kind enough to have me back. So I came back in 2018. I've been there since. I'm also known as the US boots on the ground. So currently, I'm the only US employee. I say currently, hopefully that won't be the case for long. And then I'm also, I would classify myself jack of all trades, master of a few. Not master of none, just a few. I've been all over the board. When I first started with Umbraco, I was one of the first non-dev hires. I still had a little bit of that background, but compared to the core devs, I was very much not on their level. So I started in support. I did a lot of the Umbraco TV videos, and then now I, as I mentioned, I run the training departments, do tutorials, presentations, things like this, and then also partner management. Work with our partners and the people out there using Umbraco. So that's a little bit about me and my background. As for the agenda, what I wanted to talk with you all about today, start off with a background of Umbraco. Where did it come from? Where is it now? Some of the benefits of using Umbraco, again, kind of high level in those slides. But then what I really want to do is actually showcase the CMS. So we'll dive into it just for a moment to see kind of just how it looks, how it works and operates. So how to work with Umbraco. And then I'll also talk about Umbraco Cloud, which is the software as a service offering. It is the hosted version of Umbraco, but it's so much more than that. And I'll cover that. And then quickly touch on partnerships and training and certification. So the partnership side of it, to essentially get that information out there, and then also training if this is a route that you do want to go or you think Umbraco would interest you. Our training is the quickest way to get up to speed and in the best practices. And then I'll have some time for questions at the end, but like I mentioned, feel free to chime in at any time to ask any questions that come up. So starting off, a little background, a little Umbraco background. Where did this whole thing start and where is it now? This was in 2013 when I joined the HQ. And so this was, I think it was 9 people. One of these gentlemen wasn't actually a part of the HQ. And this was my first HQ retreat. That was me right there. And it's very interesting because Umbraco actually started back in 2005 by the founder, Niels. He's the gentleman kind of behind the tall guy in the middle. And so Niels started or founded Umbraco back in 2005. And then it quickly became an open source platform because many people were asking him to use the CMS that he created. And then it built out rather organically from there and until it started to build a community. And so there's almost 3 aspects of Umbraco that I always like to discuss. It's almost like the Umbraco trifecta. And those 3 components are the community. I'll touch more on that in just a moment. The HQ, which is the profitable and sustainable entity behind the software. And then there's the third component is the actual software itself. So the HQ is just one part of Umbraco, and then there's actually the software and the community. So this is the HQ. Well, this is the HQ last year. It's grown even more since last year. And as you can see, it's quite a noticeable difference in the amount of people. That's me again, right up there. So Umbraco, the HQ component of it has grown tremendously, as well as the actual software and the community too. So why don't we just cover some of the quick highlights here. It's the most common and popular Microsoft-based CMS in the world. There are other very large .NET CMSs, but none that are at the amount of sites that we have. So I know that like Sitecore is a really big one, and what are some of the other ones? .NET Nuke, I think that's still around, and Kentico, I believe, is .NET. So there's other ones out there, but a lot of those, I think all the ones I just mentioned are licensed products. And so we're an open source platform. And there's more than a decade of history here. As I mentioned, Umbraco, the software, got started back in 2005. There's over 50 people working at the Umbraco HQ now. And a lot of that growth has happened since 2016. So that's when the founder, Niels, he's a great guy. And he is kind of one of those visionary minds. He's got a great idea for a product and how to make it happen, but then from a management side, how to manage and build an organization. He thought it was best to maybe hand that off to somebody who had a lot of experience with that. So that's what he did back in 2016. And gentleman laying down in the middle, his name's Kim, and he came on board as our chief, chief friend? No, not chief friend maker. He's essentially our CEO is his role. And he's done a great job building out these different teams to support Umbraco. So we've grown massively since 2016, and the growth probably won't stop just because the adoption of Umbraco is continuing to spread. We have over 221,000 active community members, active being that they're engaging on the community site, which is our.umbraco.org. That just means that they're on there either posting questions, responding to form threads, creating new packages, whatever else it may be. There's also more than 500,000 active websites, which is really cool. And this is probably a conservative number. The way that we know that is only based on, we have a central server that essentially like pings or the sites ping back for updates to see if there's an update available. Other than that, we don't track how Umbraco is used. Whenever Umbraco is installed and implemented, there's no tracking. We don't know what sites are actually built on Umbraco and using Umbraco unless an agency tells us that they built a site on it, or the company gets in touch with us and says that they're using the software. It's a conservative number, but we have more than 500,000 active websites using Umbraco. There's also, more than 1,200 add-ons from the community, which is really exciting, things that you can do to extend the functionality of what comes out of the box in Umbraco. These are pretty much add-ons, plugins, packages, that sort of thing. And then also more than 1,100 partners worldwide. And like I mentioned, I'll touch on the partners more later in the presentation. So what's some of the news and what's to come? Very exciting times for Umbraco. Like I said, there's been a lot of growth going on. Umbraco Apps launched in January, and Apps is almost an extension of packages. But the apps are they're a little bit more tailored. So there are still free and open source package options, but then we're also working with companies that have their own software that want to integrate with Umbraco and maybe have like a paid version or something along those lines. So Umbraco Apps is going to continue to build out. Version 8 launched, which is also very exciting. It's been in the works for a couple of years now. I think it was talked about back when I joined in 2013, and it launched now, which is very exciting. And it came with a few features that are just helping make the editing experience even better than it was, more user-friendly, and also a ton of code-based changes to make it more efficient and that sort of thing. Umbraco Headless is also launching in 2019. Umbraco's always been great at storing content, how to handle that content, how to organize and structure that data. And so Headless is going to be a platform where you can push that data to something else maybe besides a website. So I know that we all these personal assistants and things like Amazon Echo or Siri, whatever else it may be, there's starting to become apps for these, and that data still has to come from somewhere. So Umbraco Headless could be an option for things like that, or even displaying, promo banners on boards or whatever else it may be. And then V8 training. I run the training department, like I mentioned, and so we've updated all of our training to version 8. So that's now what we are teaching everybody in. And the vision for Umbraco is that by the end of 2021, we want to have a million live sites on Umbraco. And of that, 10%, so 100,000, we want on Umbraco Cloud, where it makes sense. And again, I'll touch on Umbraco Cloud a little bit more later. It's just a fun little graph. It just shows 24 hours of, Sitefinity. I just now noticed that. Thanks, Mike. That was the other .NET CMS. But yeah, 24 hours of Umbraco installs. You can see that it's very active. Every time that it gets downloaded, then we just like mark the little area on the map. It's every day people are downloading, installing, building, extending Umbraco. And there's some really big names. There's small names, big names. It's all across the board that use Umbraco, but some that stand out are the EU uses Umbraco. Carlsberg, it's like the European Budweiser equivalent, maybe. But what is that? Anheuser-Busch? Yeah, beer, essentially. It's a very large beer company. Also, KPMG uses Umbraco, Amnesty International, Thomas Cook, Jaguar, Rolls-Royce, Microsoft, Amazon. If you go to like ASP.net, the website ASP.net, and you scroll down, you can see it says powered by Umbraco, which is pretty cool. It's been that way since I joined up with the HQ. So that's a little bit of background on Umbraco, where it started, where it's at now, some stats around it. And so now let's talk about some of the benefits of Umbraco. Why I think, I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but why I think it's the go-to choice of CMS. So the first thing is that it's flexible. It's really interesting when you download and install Umbraco, out of the box, it's so funny almost. There's not much there. In fact, from a website standpoint, there isn't anything there. And the reason for this is because Umbraco exposes the functionality for you to create the foundation of your website. It's completely tailored to whatever your website, web application needs, because we know that no two websites, no two web applications are going to be the same. So we want to create a tool that can be flexible to handle that. So really, it just gives you the freedom to manage and do things your way. Another great way that I've heard this explained, specifically for developers, is that Umbraco gets out of the developer's way, which I took as a good compliment, that it's not in their way to try to create something or build something. Also, best of breed, best of you. Essentially, Umbraco focuses on what it's best at, which is content management. And then we've tried to make it as easy as possible to integrate with other tools that are best at what they're best at. So whether that's email marketing, automation, e-commerce, personalization, whatever it may be, then we try to focus on the content component, and then how you can integrate with the tools that you already know and love to work with alongside Umbraco, instead of offering like a full suite of those additional, I guess, components inside the CMS. We just make it easy to integrate with them. Friendliest community. Now this one's huge, and this is really what makes up a lot of Umbraco, especially being an open source product, is what do you do for support if you run into a problem? And the community out there, as I mentioned, it's over 221,000 developers that are active, that are on the forum, that are using Umbraco and that sort of thing. And it's kind of hard to put into words. It's one of those things that you got to be there and experience it. But I'd encourage you, there's Umbraco meetups that happen occasionally around the US. There's a lot that go on over in the UK and Denmark. I think some happen in Australia too. And then there's also our annual conference. And so those are the times that the community actually comes together to discuss the software. But the community aspect of it is really what created the growth of Umbraco back in its early days, because it was a community-based, apologies. It was a community-based piece of software. It was people adding into it, and to see the core develop over the years based on these community contributions has been pretty spectacular. And the way that works is that community members can submit something called a pull request to the core. And that pull request is like a request for change. Hey, I built this thing. What do you guys think of it? And then it comes to the HQ. So from the community to the HQ. And then the HQ will look it over, make sure that it's best practice, sometimes tweak it so it aligns with the user interface better, and then implement it into the core of the CMS. The one that will always stand out to me, because it's kind of when I got started with Umbraco, was the grid editor. It's a really easy way for content editors to be able to create content in the back office, and it kind of gives a visual representation of what it looks like on the front end. It was a community-based package that was created by, I think they were a gold partner or one of our partners, and then it got built into the core years back, and it's only gotten better with time, which is really cool. So yeah, the community, it's a huge, and it's also, without getting too feely and emotional, it's an amazing group of people. It's very intelligent people, and everybody that I come across is always very interested to share what they've learned and how they've done something. So you're really never left stranded, I guess. And on that note, there's also support from the HQ, but I'll get into that later. Friendliest editor-centered user interface. So this is a quick screenshot. We'll get into this in a moment, but it's just a very easy to use user interface. As I mentioned, I had a year where I was actually implementing Umbraco sites on the agency side of things, and to hand off a site on Umbraco to an end user, to a client who had never heard of Umbraco, who was pretty, what would the word be, like agnostic to what software they were on. They didn't particularly care. They just wanted to be able to use the software, right? And to hand these projects off to them and not really have to give them any specific training. They just understood what we put together based on how Umbraco is to use, the user interface of it, and then also the way that we developed it, of course. But it's very fulfilling to see people, how easy it is for them to move around and understand what's going on in Umbraco from an editor side of things. And then also get specialist answers from our support warriors. So we do have a support team at the HQ, as our team of 50 plus. A large chunk of that is, we actually call them SWAT, SWAT, support warriors and troubleshooters. And so you can get help and guidance from not only our support team at the HQ, but then there's also developers that work with our support team as well for that guidance. So that's the high level, some of the benefits of Umbraco. What does it have to offer? But really, the best way to explain it is to actually take a look at the software, right? So I can showcase how it works, how it functions, and that sort of thing. So why don't we see it in action before I dive into the actual presentation of or the demo of the Umbraco site? Then I just wanted to cover these quick building blocks, you could call them. Again, at a high level, I mentioned it's very extendable. The reason Umbraco is so extendable is because it's based on something. The foundational component of it is something called a document type. The document type is just defining what the data is going to be, what the editor is going to be working with. Once you have your document types, then you can create content based on those document types. And then once you have the content there, you have to somehow display that on your website. And that's where templates and Razor come in, is that Razor is a syntax that you use to pull the data from that content. And then in our template, we're merging that data stored in Umbraco with HTML and pushing it out to a website, is the general idea. So these are the basic building blocks. It looks something like this. On the left side, that is a document type. So you can see we're defining it with a homepage, and then we're giving it something called properties, company name, company address, company phone. And on the right side is what our editors would see. Obviously, this is a very basic example with just text strings and text areas. There's much more robust editors out there, but just for simplicity's sake, this is similar to how it would work, is that you define your content with document types, and then that gets presented to our editors so that they can enter in and store content. So let's take a look. Let's actually dive into a little demo of it. So I've got just a site pulled up right here. And so this is a completely standard install of Umbraco. Essentially what I did, and I'll go through this once I start talking about cloud a little bit, but you could get this up and running yourself in 10, 15 minutes maybe. Essentially, if you download Umbraco, and you can do that at our.umbraco, I'll just head over there. This is the community site just for reference, our.umbraco.org. And if you go there, my computer always runs a little bit slower when I'm running the Zoom meetings. I think it might be. Also, it doesn't help that I've got like 20 Chrome tabs open either. But this is our community site, and then you can go to download. And once you go to download, then you can download Umbraco right there. Download. And then what I'm using here is just the starter kit. So it's a package called the starter kit, and you install it, and then boom, like you pretty much have the screen that you're looking at right here. It's very basic with navigation, a banner, some sub pages, blog posts, and that's about it. And then we can go check out the sub pages, products, that sort of thing. That's what the front end looks like. And then if we go to the back end, we can see how Umbraco is actually kind of displaying this and how we can manipulate it very easily as a content editor. So if I go to the back office, this is what the Umbraco back office looks like. I'm on cloud, so I'll get into these things in this big dashboard in just a moment. But the thing I want to focus on is over here, and this is called our content tree. And so you can see that everything in our content tree is what our content editors, our end client, or whoever the person you might be building a website for would be manipulating. And so I can come over here to our home node or homepage, whatever you would like to call it. We sometimes call these, everything over here is called a tree. So this is our content tree. And then in our tree, it's either made up of nodes or pages. You can see here that there's basic text like we looked at before. There's also things like content pickers, so we can point to other pieces of content, other pages. We can also insert things like, I think this is a macro, and this is also utilizing a grid, so I can hit plus and then add different layouts to this if I so choose. And then we get to adjust our footer as we see fit. And then down here, you can see that we can work with images, and also multiple choice or radio buttons to choose different things. And I want to make a quick change here just to show how easy it is when it's set up this way. Again, you can install this and play around with this too. But if I change this, right now we have the font to standard. Why don't I change it to mono, and I'll change the color theme to water. So before I hit save, we'll go look at the site. We can see it's kind of this pinkish tone, and it's got a certain font. And as a content editor, I could come in here, make those changes. Obviously, it's been configured this way for us. And then when I come back here and refresh our site, just making those simple changes, we can change the theme, change the font. I could go in there, change the images, change the price, whatever else it may be, right? We're managing our content. And this is what a content editor would be exposed to seeing, how they could update their website. So that's some of the basic components of it is these different, they're called properties, and how a content editor would come into the picture. You can also see that the pages are rather intuitive. So here this says products, and sure enough, we have a products page. So a lot of what we see here would probably be similar to what exists on that page. I can come over here to, this is something called our content app. And we can adjust different things such as the title, our gorgeous selection, AgencyTribe, products, whatever it may be. We'll go ahead and hit save. And you can see that it's just very easy to work with. And it just kind of, again, intuitive, makes sense in AgencyTribe. Great. Now from a less content editor focus and more of a developer. I don't want to spend too much time here because I'm not sure how much of us are dev focused versus like client side or marketing teams or whatever else it may be. But this is just our content section. This is what we would expose to our content editors. But then as a developer, somebody implementing an Umbraco site, then you would come over to our settings section. And I had already mentioned this a little bit, but there's this concept of a document type. And the document type is the definition of our site. Nothing is in Umbraco when you get started, as I mentioned. And so where you start is with document types. You create a storage place for and a definition for the content that's going to exist. So if we go look at the homepage, document type, then you can see this is where all of those properties came from. Is that I went in here, somebody went in here, like I said, it just installed a starter kit. And then you just add these different properties. And so when you add a property, then that's what gets exposed in the content section to the content editor. The really cool thing and powerful thing here is that once you create these different document types, the foundation of your site, the content editor can not only add to these properties, but they can continue expanding the site to however large it needs to be. So you can see here that we've got a product and products. Once that storage place and definition has been created, then the content editor can create as many products underneath that product page as they would like. For example, if I go back to the content section, you can see here that we have certain products already listed underneath here in a list view. And then I can create an additional product as a content editor. And then it gives me all the necessary fields that I need to create this new product. The way it's doing that is because it's based on that foundational component, that document type. So as I mentioned, it'll probably, let's see here. As I mentioned, there's some basic building blocks. There's the document types, the actual content itself, and then there's also something called templates. And templates are the actual display component of working with Umbraco. This is why I chose the CMS. It works like web apps. Very cool. Web apps like Azure Web Apps? Or web apps, is that a different system? Pardon me. It's a business catalyst term. Ah, I see.
This looks like similar to what we would understand as web apps.
Okay,
great. Familiar with Business Catalyst. Would that be correct, BC people?
Looks like it's a bit BC web apps, yeah. Well, great. It's good to hear that it's familiar. This is a pretty common pattern even for, I've never worked with like Sitecore or the other CMSs. I've kind of played around a little bit, but as I mentioned, I do the trainings and I've had people show me like some of their implementations, and the terminology changes a bit, but the structure is often can be similar across different systems. So hopefully that makes it, if it's a consideration, easy to transition. It's just maybe a little bit different terminology. So document types, we covered that. Content, we talked about that. And then the next component is talking about templates. Templates are the display aspect of Umbraco. And so if I go to something like our homepage template, it looks like there's a lot going on here, and I won't focus too much on this, but the point is this is mostly just HTML. And a lot of it is just static HTML. You see we're setting classes, so certain styling to our HTML. And then we also have these highlighted @ signs. And that's where we get into Razor. No, templates is Razor layout. Yeah, correct. It is a Razor layout, but it's our display portion of this. And there's HTML within our Razor layout. Hopefully that makes sense. And so what Razor is, that actually brings up the next component of what goes into this. Template, as I mentioned, is our display portion of it. And we're able to incorporate this Razor syntax to add, the Razor syntax is equivalent to BC module tags. Yeah, so it's essentially adding some sort of logic to our templates. This is how we're able to pull the data that's stored in Umbraco and merge that alongside the HTML and display out to the website, essentially, to the person that's going to be visiting the site. For example, here we're on our homepage, and right here on our footer, we have we're calling the value that's being stored in our footer header. But if I wanted to, I can simply just add HTML. I'll put an H1 tag here and say hello from the back office. And if I save that and go back to our homepage, then we'll get that text essentially output as I let it load and then scroll down. Hopefully it'll be quick. And while we wait for that, I can just keep discussing a little bit of the back office. So this is essentially the back office. Your developers or implementers are going to be working in the, you can compare using Razor to using Liquid. Cool. So the settings section is mostly where our developers and implementers are going to be using or implementing Umbraco, creating the foundation for it. And then our content and media sections are kind of where we would expose our end users or our end client, the person that's going to be manipulating the content. We would expose them to those different sections. And if I scroll down, you can see hello from the back office, right? So we can either put just HTML in there and it works as HTML would, as we would expect, or we can also do something called Razor. We can implement Razor syntax to then call the data that's being stored in Umbraco. So there's nothing too magical going on here, even though if you're not a developer, this might look like a whole big mess. But for those of you that are developer centered, then hopefully that's not too overwhelming. Yeah. So that's a high level overview of Umbraco, and I'm going to show us how to get to this point, how to get started here in just a moment using Cloud. It's the easiest way to get started. As I mentioned, you can also go to the community and download it, but I'll show Cloud in just a moment here because that's actually what this site is running on. Great. Let's go ahead and present that again. Hopefully. Oh, it's got captions somehow. That's pretty cool. So here's the amazing part, and the part that I love, and hint, it's an open source software, right? It's free. Everything that I've just covered, all the functionality that you just saw in there, it's totally free to use, to set up. You can download it. And like I mentioned, the HQ doesn't even know what these sites are necessarily about unless you want to show off your awesome websites to us. And so it's, we're calling it Umbraco free, but it's just Umbraco, the core CMS. Whether you're using the core CMS doesn't change. We never take anything away from it, whether that's on Umbraco Cloud or on this professional plan that I'll touch on in just a moment. So you can use Umbraco totally free, and that'll never change. It's been that way since 2005, and it will continue that way. There isn't a professional pricing tier, and so this comes with support. So it's support for the site that you're building out, and then it also has certain things built into it. Forms licenses. So Umbraco has like a little forms package to build out contact forms, submission forms, that sort of thing. Also, access to Umbraco TV, which normally has a subscription fee associated with it, and then also a discount on training, a yearly discount on training. So there is that option, but the focus here isn't to sell that. It's just to say that Umbraco is free, it kind of blows my mind, and to see it be as sustainable as it's been, and to see the growth that it's had while still offering that. And it will continue to do so. So it brings up the question, how does that actually scale? Oh, what is Umbraco TV? Very great question. Umbraco TV is, interestingly enough, where I got my start. But if you head over to umbraco.tv, there's a lot of video tutorials there. Some of them are free and some of them require a subscription, but Umbraco TV is a great option to learn the basics of Umbraco. It covers more in depth about document types and templating and content creation. And then it goes developer focused too. BC Guru tutorials. Yeah. It goes more in depth too with the developer side of things, concepts like models builder and all that good stuff. So how does it scale? Where will Umbraco be in 1, 5, 10 years? It's quite amazing because the structure that's been implemented has proven itself to work, and it will continue to work. And that is through a few different components. And this is why I put the last 3 things on the agenda for today, talking about Umbraco Cloud, also just to show that there's this software as a service offering and cover what that includes. But then also through things like partnerships and also the training. It's how the HQ continues to grow and be a sustainable company while still offering a free open source .NET CMS. So let's take a moment to talk about Umbraco Cloud. Umbraco Cloud got launched, I think it was two years ago. And like I mentioned, it is hosted Umbraco, but I'm almost hesitant to even say that because it's so much more than just hosted Umbraco. The concept originated because as we were listening to our partners and to people implementing Umbraco, the common question that always came up, and same for me in trainings, the same questions: how do we handle upgrades? What's the best way to do deployments? Right? Because it's kind of hard to transfer not only the files, the code base across environments, but then also the content. How are you moving the content? How do you make sure everything stays in sync? There's also this concept of baselines and so much more. So I'll touch on those for just a moment. So here's some of the features around cloud: automated upgrades. Whenever there's a patch, whenever there's a security patch, it just goes out automatically, and all patch releases you'll already automatically get them to the site. Patch releases are automatically pushed out because there's never any breaking changes in there. And then there's minor and major upgrades, and there's a certain process for that so that you can handle that, and it will never touch your live site. So you can make sure it works before that gets deployed. So automated upgrades, and then there's also deploy. It's an easier way to deploy content and features. I'll quickly showcase how this can be done. But then I also just want to point out you can always get a free trial of Umbraco Cloud if you just go to umbraco.com and put in an email address. And then there's also Umbraco Latch. It's essentially automating security certificates for every site that you create on Umbraco Cloud. We partnered up with Let's Encrypt, and so that's how we're handling that, which is just it's another nice aspect that you don't have to worry about, ensuring that those certificates are always going to be there. And then this one is huge, the baseline feature. It's probably the one I'm most excited about, and it's essentially spinning up a project that contains all of the base components. I talked about the foundation being your document types and maybe some other aspects that you would put into every single Umbraco site. And this is how we did it at the web agency I worked with, is that we had this baseline, right? A base template that we would use, and then we would create child sites off of that template. The only problem with the structure that we had back then was, what if we wanted to update the baseline? Well, then we'd have to manually make that update to all of the child sites as well, or they just wouldn't get the update. And so with baselines, essentially you've got one master or this baseline project, and then you create child sites off of that project, and it will incorporate all of those baseline features so that you've got a starting point to go from. The really cool thing is that if you then update the baseline, then that gets pushed out to all of your child projects, which is a great way to handle those updates. Let me just close the blinds real quick here. I can reach over. Much better. It's hosted on Microsoft Azure, so it is hosted, which is a big component of it. It's hosted on Umbraco. There's no hassle getting everything set up, dealing with environments. It's just set up for you. And what it really is a complementary option to the core CMS. Like I mentioned, we're never going to take anything away from what the core CMS is. And so we understand that the cloud offering might not fit all projects, but it surprisingly does fit most of them. Again, not all. And if we go back to that vision, we want to have 1 million sites on Umbraco by 2021, and just 10% of them we're hoping are on Umbraco Cloud. And I think once I show you the ease of the system, it just kind of makes sense to utilize in some cases. Again, I don't want to say for all. I guess I'm excited about the functionality it has. The cloud pricing, it's $30 a month for the starter plan, and the professional plan has support built in as well. So that's $470 a month. And I should mention as well, the starter plan still has support for the environments, right? Umbraco still supports that these environments are working, and if there's any issues there, then we still are there to add that support. The professional plan is more for if you're adding custom integrations with something else and you need input from one of the core devs or something along those lines. So let's take a look at Umbraco Cloud and what that looks like. So if you go to umbraco.io, that's how you get there. And and I've got a few different logins. So this is essentially what the portal looks like, Umbraco.io. If you want to sign up for a trial, like I mentioned, just go to umbraco.com and enter in an email. And then you get these are all my different projects, all my different websites that I have running. And it's really easy to create a new one. And this is the route I would recommend if any of you want to play around with Umbraco and get started in the quickest way possible. Creating a new site. See it in euros. Yeah, and it should, the pricing is pricing in USD, or are there other currencies? Yeah, it's it'll be based on your location. So I think it's $30 a month for the US, it's 25 euros for Europe, and I think it separates it out for the UK too, I do believe. And it's like that with all of the pricing across Umbraco, whether it's Umbraco Cloud, partnerships, training, it converts. Yeah. So this is what our dashboard, our Umbraco Cloud portal, I should say, looks like. And to create a new project, oh, that's what I was mentioning. If you want to play around with Umbraco, this would be the easiest way to do it. Go to umbraco.com, enter in the email, and it'll spin up one of these projects for you. And if you are using cloud or you want to build a site on cloud, then you just say create new project. You can either choose the starter plan or the professional plan and say get started, and then it'll ask if you want to use a baseline or not. So I'll go into this one just because it's my little demo site, and it's the one that we were looking at before. You'll see that we have an environment here, and this environment is what's hosting this website right here. So when I spun this up, it was a completely empty install of Umbraco. And all that I did was I created the project, and then I went to the back office, this button right here. It took me to this page, the content, and everything was empty. There was no doc types, no content tree, no settings, anything like that. And so then from there, I went to packages and just actually, I don't even have to type it, the most popular package, which is the starter kit. And then I just installed that. So if you want to get started, that's a very, very easy way to go about doing it. Probably take you 10, 15 minutes with some waiting with coffee or water, whatever it may be. Maybe you're doing it after work with a beer. I don't know. So that's a little bit about the portal and what the project looks like. Most of it is still standard Umbraco. There's just a few components that are unique to Umbraco Cloud. And so that, for one, that's this portal. If we wanted to pull this locally and work on it like on our local environment or development environment, then all you have to do is either click how to connect to my machine. It gives you something called a clone URL, and you can pull locally to your own machine using whatever your favorite Git client is. So it uses Git, and you would pull down the project, and then you can work on the file system that way. The other thing to note is that when you're in the back office, the only difference from a standard Umbraco install is this dashboard that we saw before. You can see here that it's indicating that my current workspace is live. So this dashboard won't exist if you're not on Umbraco Cloud. Instead, it'll be like a welcome dashboard. And so what this is doing is it's indicating to us where we're at. And then if I were to pull locally, it would indicate, and I was running it locally on my machine, then it would indicate that I was here. Now, what we can do with Umbraco Cloud is handle those deployments. And so it kind of has a two-part deployment approach. We're going to be moving all of our code as one part, and that's going to be all done through Git or your favorite Git client, whatever it may be. And then once that's in place, once the foundational code pieces are in place, then you can work with content and media. And so if I wanted to, if I right-click on content, actually, wait, let's hit the... Right, I don't have another environment to pull from. So I'd have to spin it up locally, but essentially if I right click on this, what it would say if I was local is that I could queue for transfer. And let me see if I can get that any other way. Yeah, I guess there's no environment to transfer it to. So if I was working on this locally, and for the sake of time, I won't spin up my local instance. Well, we'll see how we run, and I can come back to it. But essentially what I would do is just right click on this. You can see that we've got a whole bunch of options here. And this is just standard Umbraco. And then with Umbraco Cloud, we'd see one other option to queue for transfer. What that would do is it would put this content and all content beneath it, if we chose that, into a queue. And then we would come back to this dashboard just by clicking on content. And then it would say, hey, there's pending items in your queue. Do you want to deploy those? You'd say, yes, deploy. And then it would run through the process and it would push them from here. And then it would show a little arrow showing that they're moving up to live. And it's just that easy for your content to be pushed. The other really cool thing is that if you're local and there's a live website with content editors manipulating content, updating content, then when you start developing on your local machine, you'd like to work on the latest content, right? Not dummy content or anything like that, or outdated content for that matter. And so there's also a restore option. And so if we were on the local environment, I could right click on content and then we see a restore option. And then you choose the environment. We can also add other environments here, manage environments. I can add a development one if I so choose. But then we could pull down all of the content from live to development to our local machine to work against, to add all of our code changes to and all that sort of thing. Other than that, the Umbraco back office itself is pretty much the same. You're going to get this dashboard, which is different from a standard install of Umbraco, and then you're going to get those functionalities to restore and queue for transfer and then deploy. So yeah, that's about it for Umbraco Cloud. There is a webinar for Umbraco Cloud. So if you're interested in that, I'll be sure to follow up with an email with a whole bunch of links so that if any of this stuff is specifically interesting for you, I'll give you more resources so that you can follow up on any of these different components. So that is Umbraco Cloud. Yes, Ursh, I'll make sure to do that. There's also there's webinars for Umbraco Cloud, the Umbraco CMS in general, and I'm trying to think what else. And then there's just tons of resources. So I'll make sure to put that together. So there's also partner programs and also training. These are the last things that I'll cover, and then I'll open it up to questions and dialogue with everybody. So our Umbraco partner programs, how to get involved. Essentially, there's 3 different tiers of partnership, and none of these are required, again, to work with Umbraco. It's just the level of involvement that you have with the HQ. So top tier, or our highest tier of partnership, is Gold Partnership. These are our closest and most valuable partnerships. It comes with a lot of different perks and value added. We also have our certified partnerships, which are also another great way to get involved with a partnership without going full gold. And then registered partners. And registered partners are essentially just part of our ecosystem, a way for people to say, hey, we work with you guys. You might not know that because again, we don't track that in any way. And so like, hey, keep us up to date on the latest news and that sort of thing. I won't go into depth on each one of these. If partnership is something that you'd be interested in talking about or looking at with Umbraco, I'm more than happy to discuss. So I'll just give a high-level overview here. But we've essentially, the way that we've structured this with the training, with Umbraco Cloud, with the partnerships, and the way that Umbraco scales still as an open source offering is by adding value where we can. So on top of just the software. And so essentially we just tried to pack in as much value as we can to these different components, whether that's partners, cloud, or training. So as you can see here, there's different categories: registered, certified, and gold. There's different benefits that you would get with each of these. If I just talk about gold partners, then it comes with a badge and certain listing on .com. So you can see all of our gold partners on umbraco.com. Specific profile on there. Also access to the marketing material that Umbraco puts together. Lead matching and qualification. So whenever leads come into the HQ, hey, we need somebody to help us build our site, work on our site, update our site, whatever it may be. We work really closely with our gold partners, and so we try to associate that lead with the partner that would be the best match. And then also things like sales support. It also, depending on partner level, comes with certain training and certification benefits. So access to Umbraco TV, Gold Partner Academy, which is a free training every year for a developer that's a part of the Gold Partner program. Online training, get to choose a training every year that they want to attend. And then also the education program. That one's really cool. We essentially allow Gold Partners to go teach at schools. So we give them access to the fundamentals, and then they can go train schools that are interested in that. I know that at my, back when I was in college and working with Umbraco, our professors were looking for a certain way to introduce us to the concept of CMSs. And so we did like a little crash course on WordPress, but I'm sure at the time, if they knew about something like this, they would have been pretty excited about that. So yeah, that is the training and certification benefits. There's also support benefits. So depending on the level, there's also support aspects of partners. And then there's also engagement and news. So different news channels, partner discounts, and networking events. Like I mentioned, there's the annual conference called Code Garden, and that's actually just around the corner. It's a bit of a long shot, but if anybody really wants to know more about Umbraco and see the ecosystem thrive, it's our annual conference that happens in Denmark. I always mention it because, and I think it's in like 3-4 weeks in May. Yeah, in May at the HQ. And I always mention it because I used to do these trainings all around the US, and I would tell people about it and kind of laugh because I realize it's a big trip to get over there. But then I end up seeing a lot of people from the trainings over there. So if by any chance you're interested in going to Denmark and can swing that and want to get more info about Umbraco, the annual conference, Code Garden, is a great way to do that. But I digress. There's networking events for our Gold partners at those events and that sort of thing. Then comes the requirements and price. We talk about certification points and then also pricing. So certified has a price of 3,000 euros a year, and then gold is 12,000 euros a year. We realize it doesn't fit for everybody, but where it does, if it's going to be a team that's going to need training, if you're looking at things like support, then the costs start to add up, and gold partnership would make more sense. If that's not where you're at in the wheelhouse, then maybe certified, or even just registering to let us know, hey, we're working with the software. Because registering is free to do, and we can still keep you up to date on the latest news and all that sort of thing. Now, what are these certification points? What exactly is that? And that's where training ties into the next component. For both certified and gold, we just require that those agencies have 400 total certification points amongst 2 or more developers. And yeah, how do you get certification points? Essentially, we've got training and certificates. This is like my wheelhouse. This is the department that I run at Umbraco. And so it's just the best way to learn. I should say you can learn the best practices from the get-go with the training. Most of the trainings we offer online now, so it can fit your time schedule and you don't have to leave your home desk, whatever it may be. There's pros and cons to that. I do miss having the in-person aspect of trainings because I guess I tend to be personable and meet new people, but this actually works really well too, is over these Zoom calls and that sort of thing, which is how we structure the trainings. So there's different levels of training. There's certified professional, certified expert, and certified master. So regardless of if you're an agency or an independent worker, you can still attain these different levels of certification by Umbraco. The certified professional just means that you have 100 certification points, and that certification, those points would come from the fundamentals, taking the fundamentals class. Expert is 200 certification points, fundamentals, and 2 of the other courses. And then master is that 350 points, the fundamentals, foundational courses, and then there's also something called the skill courses. This is the split. Again, I won't spend too much time here, but I'll send these slides out if any of these interest you. You can see that it's split into 3 areas: fundamentals, foundations, and skill courses. So the fundamentals covers just everything in a much more in-depth perspective of what I've talked about here today. Those building blocks, how to create document types, working with properties and data types, macros, templates, all that good stuff. And then we also have our foundation courses, extending the back office, how to actually build things that look like they're out of the box for Umbraco. MVC and Visual Studio, application integrations. We're just launching a security course. The first one's going to be in May 9th, maybe May 8th for Europe, I think. And then there's skill courses, how to handle search and indexing, how to work on cloud. So if you decide to go the cloud route, we have a whole course for that. Load balancing in Umbraco, and there's a content management course as well. Great. And that's everything. So that's partners, that's cloud, that's training. It's a little background on Umbraco. Hopefully the demo showcased a very quick way to work with Umbraco. And again, that's me. So feel free to get in touch with me, shoot me an email. I hope it comes across, but I'm pretty passionate about the project. It's a fun space to work in. And again, I thank you guys for letting me come on board and talk about Umbraco. So I am open to questions and just a big thank you.
And thank you, Andrew. That was a fantastic presentation. You covered so much. And a lot of people, I think, were able to sort of match the Umbraco terminology to, constructs that we understood as well from BC, those of us that are from BC.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if anyone has any further questions. I'm just looking at the chat here. I think there was it kind of happened as we went along, didn't it? With comments and questions.
Which again is a great way to do that. And I saw was it Mike or somebody commenting on those different, on the different similarities, which is just great. It's great to see that it's that the concepts link up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it also seems that there's a few people that have been using it for some time. So another what's the word? Plug, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, exactly.
Daniel, have you used it? It looks like you've made some comments in there. Love to hear from you, and same with Mike.
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been using it for about 6 months now, and I really, really love the platform. What I love about it is that I can easily download a copy. I use Visual Studio, and then I download the Umbraco CMS, spin it up in a matter of minutes, and then create a website. I have full access to all the HTML. I love using Foundation 6 as my responsive framework, so I easily can interject that into the templates. It's just a wonderful, wonderful tool. I'm able to also host it with A2 hosting on a package that I'm only paying like $50 a month for, and I can put up to 100 websites on it. So I can host a brochure website for just a few dollars. And it also has the ability to create what those of us at BC call web apps. And so it gives me that functionality. Brochure websites that need a web app type functionality at an extremely low cost. The sites that I have been running for about 6 months are extremely stable. Never had a problem with them going down or freezing or having to restart them. So it's really, really what I love about this particular framework.
Andrew, how much did you pay him?
Seriously, Daniel, thank you. Very happy to hear that it's been a pleasant experience to work with Umbraco, and that getting
started. That's a huge testimonial, wasn't it?
It was what?
A huge testimonial.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Daniel.
So yeah, clearly, Daniel. I could also comment on that if you want. Yeah, we evaluated the options for going away from BC, and I looked around at all the options, including the BC clients that were being developed. And in the end, we went with Umbraco Cloud. And the killer feature for me with Umbraco Cloud is baselines.
Nice to hear.
Yeah, I've developed a standard client, if you like, and I can spin up a functional site in less than 5 minutes and be working on customizing it. It's just awesome. It really is.
That's awesome to hear. And like I mentioned, that's the part that excites me the most too, especially when we saw a very small glimpse of it there with, changing the styling and the text. But if you expose or want to expose pieces like that to an editor, then you can pretty much spin up a site off a baseline. And if it's got a lot of those, then they can develop their own custom site. If it's like a brochure site, like you said, a matter of minutes so it makes me happy to hear that that's an exciting part for somebody else too. So, and thank you for sharing.
That's great. It's actually really valuable to get some feedback from people that have been using the platform as well.
Absolutely.
Now, I think I have another question, actually. I think you mentioned, we used to call them apps, and we purchased those from the BC App Store, different add-ons, kind of like, WordPress plugins that allow to expand the functionality. I think in one of your slides you mentioned something similar to that. Yeah,
so there's two different routes we could go for this. There is, if you go to the community site, I think am I still sharing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. If you go to the community site, then you can go to packages. So these are all the community packages that have been built by the community. And there's a whole bunch that you can search through and browse here. Another great way to get this is that it's exposed in the Umbraco back office. So if you go to the back office and go to packages, then there's a whole packages dashboard or section where this is pulling from those packages listed on the community site. The other thing, which is new as of January, is Umbraco apps. So if you go to umbraco.com/apps, I believe is the URL, you can see some of these that are a little bit more, some of them are paid solutions and some of them are still open source packages, but they have these different, they have sometimes more robust functionality, and the ones that we list on .com have been vetted through the HQ. So you can see here there's one for booking, like a booking software, newsletter, a PIM system integration. e-commerce is one of the common e-commerce integrations that works with Umbraco and gets built into the Umbraco back office. It'll add its own section, has its own functionality. And then there's also other ones in here for things, SEO checker, all sorts of things, blog engines, personalization groups. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but
yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Great.
It's possibly also worth mentioning that provided you got some sort of programmer background, the concept of BC apps can also be compared loosely to developing Umbraco plugins, and you can develop admin console options, which can be whatever you like, can be as customizable as you like. Basically, using Angular and the API, which will let you access almost anything that you like from the back end.
Yeah, and Mike, thank you for that addition, because it ties in well. That's what we teach in the Extending the Back Office course. Again, not to be too pitchy or salesy, because you can also find a lot of this information out there on the community site and through Umbraco TV and all that stuff. But in that course, and also through those other mediums that you might find that information, it covers a big component in a lot of packages that exist in Umbraco. You create something called a property editor. This isn't all packages. There's lots of different sorts you could make, but a common one is something called a property editor. And that's what our data types are based on. A data type is something as simple as a text string, right? It's the type of data, and but it can get as complex as a grid. So that grid that I mentioned at the start of this presentation actually started as just a robust property editor using Angular and a lot of JSON configuration and a view, some HTML mixed in with Angular attributes and that sort of thing. And somebody was able to essentially build an entire functionality with a more robust property editor right into Umbraco. And then from there, we were able to, take that into the core. And even if it doesn't come into the core, you can build that functionality on your own, which is really cool. So Mike, thank you for adding that too.
I'm wondering if there's any other questions.
I'd like to make another comment. when we create a website, when he refers to data types, what he's really talking about for those of us who are PC people is that you're creating the fields just like you would in a web app. So if you go in there and you create, for example, an FAQ web app, you would create all the data types that are going to be used. And once you've done that, you don't want to have to redo that every time you create a website. So what I love about Umbraco is that you can export all the work that you've done, all the data types and files that you've imported into what's called a package. So you export that package, and when I'm ready to spin up my next site, I spin it up, and then I re-import it, and all that work we've done on the previous website gets imported. But the value—
Nice. So your package keeps evolving each time as you develop something new. You can add that to the package, and then, you know, it just gets better and better and better.
Right. And there's a lot of things that we use on a regular basis. So once we spin up a site and import that package, we're maybe 70% of the way done on our website, and then we can just focus strictly on design and data at that point. So that's another thing I really love about the platform.
Yeah, and that's a great addition. And also what you can, for anybody that kind of wants to experiment with that or like see that in practice, as I mentioned, when you either download a Umbraco site or create a trial project on cloud, it'll just be empty. So no document types, no properties, some data types that are out of the box. But there's no content there. And if you just install this starter kit, it installs all those things for you: the document types, the configured data types, the specific properties that exist on the document types, the content for you, the templates, and that same concept, like Daniel just said, can be done for your own sites. Not just this one, but you can make your own package and then install that on other ones as well, like your starter point that you would use for all sites. Yeah, very effective way to work.
I guess another point worth making is for those people with familiarity with basic areas templates. There's a couple of people that you can purchase commercial starter kits from. One of the best known, I think, is Uskind, and they have some awesome starter kits, which basically get you up and running with a fully functional site, which you can then just style, albeit at cost, of course.
Yeah, Uskind is a common one that comes up pretty often for something that's already out of the box. Well, not out of the box, an addition that can give you a good starting point. And I see a question from Greg as it relates to enterprise headless. Is this fair? The user-friendly, economical, centralized design developer mechanism for the input of enterprise data. Thus very effective for quick presentations of customized data.
Greg, maybe could you grab the microphone and let us know a little bit more about what you're asking there?
Well, as I was listening to you, you mentioned Kennecott headless, and really a follow-up to the point that you have just been talking about right now. I am seeing this for the first time, and I'm creating, a structure in my head, and I see kind of like a house in the center of like a distributed data environment, and within that house, you've got those 4 levels that you talked about that effectively manipulate all the data. But it seemed to me that the fact that it's a Microsoft environment, you're able to pull data in from a corporation pretty much at will. Kind of like IBM SPSS is doing, in order to be able to bridge the analytic part of a corporation to the design part of the corporation or the dissemination of information. And that's the essential thrust, with the underline that it's free.
Yeah. That makes me happy. That big underline is a big deal. And that is right. You could pull that information. There would have to be some endpoint or some way to connect with it, but that can be done where you would pull that information from some endpoint into Umbraco, and then with custom integration or whatever else it may be, you can then work with the data in Umbraco, or even visualize the data if it's complementary to the content that's going to be manipulated by the content editor.
So when you mentioned before searching and indexing, were you talking about the data once it gets into Umbraco, or were you just talking about the function of searching data out into the wherever?
So we've got our search and indexing course, and what that covers is essentially there's it covers how to handle search across the website. So whether that's internal or external, internal being in the back office, external being the content that an end user would come to the website and search for something. So that course is all about how to search across the whole site, whether that's internal, external, or even like member searching and that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. And that's all done, I should mention too, through something called Examine. It's written off of Lucene.net, so super fast indexer, and Examine has some Fluent API stuff built into it for easy querying. And then if that for whatever reason can't do the job, you can always fall back to like raw Lucene queries, which is robust. So good stuff. And obviously, more dev focused for those of us that have worked with the, I guess, dev side of searching before. And yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'm wondering if there's any other questions or comments. Are there any video tutorials on how to install Umbraco on Azure?
I don't know if there's any video tutorials. I'm pretty sure there'd be a blog post out there on that.
Probably worth mentioning, I think, that if you're going with Umbraco Cloud, it is on Azure.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure who was just speaking, but that is a great point. It is on Azure, and that's actually why I don't know if there's any video tutorials on it, because ever since Morocco Cloud was released, I just spin up all my projects on there, just because it makes the most sense for me to, again, with all the deployment features and then also the upgrades and baseline. But that's not to say I'm fairly certain it's straightforward and easy to get spun up on Azure. Actually, I think we do that in our load balancing course. But yeah, it's certainly possible. I'm sure that there's a post out there about it.
Are there any other questions? Comments, final parting words of wisdom and gratitude.
Well, and just final words, I guess, for me, unless any more questions come in, just a big thank you again to you all for letting me come on and present. I greatly appreciate it, and am always open to more Umbraco questions.
And together with your details, so that people that are watching the presentation down the track will be able to access that as well. So thank you very much for joining us. Very comprehensive presentation. We were really lucky also to have people that have been using the system. So we've kind of had personal experience thrown in as well, which is always good.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Of course. Thank you, Barry. And Ursh, one last note, I'll follow up with the email just with the links to the webinars that I was mentioning. So if anybody has more questions on or wants to dive further into something like cloud or even just the core CMS, I can send those links your way.
That would be awesome. Thanks very much.
Perfect.
Okay, everybody, have a wonderful rest of the day, rest of Easter. If you've still got on Easter Monday, we're over Easter over here in Australia. Have a great week.
Cheers.